Right now, somewhere, a web page loads before the finger leaves the mouse, and somewhere else, a person is still watching a circle spin. Same internet, same year, two completely different experiences of it. So here's the question for this map. Where does the internet actually move, and where does it crawl? We measure it one way, the median fixed broadband download speed in megabits per second. Median means the typical home, not the showroom. And the gap between the top and the bottom is not a gap, it's a canyon. Now, let's start at the summit. Singapore. The typical home there runs at about 425 megabits per second. That is the fastest median on the planet, and it is not an accident of wealth alone. Singapore is small, dense, and it made a decision. The whole island was wired with fiber, all the way to the front door. When the cable goes the whole distance, the speed has nowhere to bleed out. So the typical flat in Singapore loads faster than the typical office in most rich countries. A city-state turned its size into a superpower. Just behind it sits a name people rarely expect. The United Arab Emirates. About 30-85 megabits in the typical home. The desert built its towers tall and its fiber new. When you build a country mostly in the last 30 years, you skip the old copper entirely. There's no creaking legacy to rip out. You just lay glass from the start. New money, meet a clean slate. Then come the vertical cities of Asia. Hong Kong, around 35-2 megabits. When 1 million people stack into towers, one strand of fiber can serve 100 homes at once. Density is expensive to feed, but cheap to wire. The lift shaft becomes a highway. Now look at Europe, where one country pulls ahead of the rest. France, also about 352 megabits in the typical home. A decade ago, French broadband was a punchline. Then the state pushed fiber hard into the cities and deep into the countryside. Today, France quietly outspeeds Germany, outspeeds Britain, outspeeds nearly everyone. Slow and steady didn't win. Stubborn and well-funded did. But here's the one that should stop you. Chile. The typical Chilean home gets about 335 megabits per second. That is faster than the United States. Chile is not a rich country, not by the standards of this map. It simply chose to lay fiber aggressively and let companies fight to fill it. Income did not decide this race. Policy did. A country built a faster internet than its wealth would predict, and it did it on purpose. So where does that leave the United States? About 310 megabits in the typical home. Comfortable. Sixth in the world, give or take. Not the leader the country tends to imagine. America invented much of the internet, and now ranks behind a city-state, a desert, and Chile. The Pioneer is no longer the fastest car on the road. Now, the comfortable middle. This is where most of the rich world actually lives. Switzerland, around 293 megabits. Denmark, about 292. Spain and Canada, both near 278. All excellent. All a fraction of a second from instant. The truth is, past a certain speed, you stop noticing the number. The page just appears. For these countries, the race was won years ago, and nobody threw a party. Then, a quiet surprise from the east. South Korea, about 258 megabits. Japan, about 255. For 2 decades, these were the postcards for fast internet. They were first, and being first means your fiber is now the old fiber. The rest of the world bought newer glass. The pioneers didn't slow down. Everyone else just sprinted past while they coasted. And then the giant. China, about 207 megabits in the typical home. Spread across a continent and more than 1 billion people, that is a staggering feat of construction. China wired farms and mountains that most countries would have written off. The median sits below Singapore's, but the scale behind it has no equal. One number, holding up the largest internet on Earth. Now the map starts to change color, and we should be honest about what that color means. Brazil, about 222 megabits, leads much of the developing world and is climbing fast. But step across to India, and the typical home drops to roughly 61 megabits. India is racing, adding fiber faster than almost anyone. Yet 1 billion plus people pull the median down. The gap from here is no longer about minutes. It is about whether the country was wired at all. And here the canyon truly opens. South Africa, about 49 megabits in the typical home. Then Nigeria, the giant of Africa, at roughly 37. Remember, Singapore was 425, so the typical home in Lagos receives, very roughly, a tenth the speed of the typical home in Singapore. Same websites, same apps, a tenth of the road to reach them. The divide isn't just that one person waits longer. It's that the slow line quietly shuts doors the fast one never even sees. It gets starker still. Pakistan, about 18 megabits in the typical home. Ethiopia, around 11. At these speeds, a video call freezes, an online class stalls, a job application times out halfway through. The internet was supposed to be the great equalizer. On this map, it mostly mirrors the inequality that was already there. The web did not flatten the world. It photographed it. And at the very bottom of the map sits Cuba, the typical home connection, around 4 megabits per second. To load what Singapore loads in 1 second, a home in Havana may wait the better part of 100. That is not a slower version of the same internet. It is, in practice, a smaller one. When the pipe is that thin, whole parts of modern life simply do not fit through it. Now, step back, because the most hopeful fact on this map is hidden in time. Just 5 years ago, the typical home anywhere on Earth got about 53 megabits per second. Today, that global figure is closer to 178. The world's internet roughly tripled in 5 years. The slow are getting faster, fast. The floor is rising, even where the ceiling is far away. But here's the thing the trend hides. While the bottom tripled, the top tripled too. Singapore is already wiring homes for 10,000 megabits, 10 gigabit lines by 2028. So the gap in raw speed keeps widening, even as everyone improves. Everybody is running faster. The leaders simply have longer legs. So what does this map really measure? Not cleverness, not even money, not entirely. It measures choices and density and timing. Who wired early? Who wired late and skipped the mistakes? Who decided that fiber to a single farmhouse was worth the cost? The fastest internet on Earth was not won by the richest. It was won by whoever bothered to lay the glass. And in the end, the speed of your internet is just the speed of a decision somebody made about you years ago, often before you ever logged on.